You're listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, giving you weekly sports analysis, opinions, and discussion. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and J-Raff.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 147th episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays, alongside of me, co-host J-Raff.
Yeah, and we've kind of been, dipping our toe in the football pool, if you will, for the last month or so. And today we are actually going to get on board, and we're diving all the way in now.
Yeah.
Football is in complete full swing, and we have plenty to talk about, including, we'll get to that in a second, but there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, a lot, because we weren't going to be here this week because of where we were and what we were doing yesterday. Both of us very busy, away all day. We were at the same place doing the same thing. We went to Happy Valley to cheer on Penn State in their home opener, the first home game for James Franklin and his Nittany Lions. And they emerged victorious, which is great. We're going to talk about that in a little bit here. So we weren't going to have a show this weekend, but things got a little bit messed up last weekend. So we shifted the last of our previews, which kind of the most important part of our previews is the East divisions, because that's, Eagles, Dolphins both reside in
important divisions.
Most important divisions in football. So we're going to quickly do that here. And now, we knew people would whine that we're doing this after some of the games have been played. So what we did was we posted our, win total expected, or our predictions for the team's records on our Facebook page in advance of this show, just so no one can say, oh, you did this after week one, and, you see what happened, you knew what happened in these games, these are important to the overall standings.
Speak for yourself. I don't think any of our listeners would do that.
No, they totally would. I can count at least 5 that would point it out. So we put them up there. We're going to do quickly... We're going to go over why we thought that this would happen, while the AFC and NFC East division would finish the way we put on the Facebook page earlier this week. But we're also going to touch on the first 2 weeks of Penn State football, the first 2 weeks of Wilson football. Oh, and we have week 1 of the NFL action to talk. So we have a lot to do in 45 minutes. So we're going to get rolling here quickly. I think before we even do any of the context stuff, let's go back just a few moments when we were talking about Penn State. Now, we're already working on week 3 of the college season, and Penn State's 2-0, which is where you want them to be.
Absolutely.
And it's actually where you didn't think they'd be.
No.
And they almost weren't.
Right. Yeah, you can look at that a couple different ways. Yes, I had them, when we went through game for game, I had them losing to UCF, and I had them beating Akron. I'm glad to be wrong on the UCF, and what an exciting game that was in Ireland. Everything going on around it. However, it was the Akron game yesterday. I think the word I used when we were up there yesterday was uninspiring, and I still think that's an appropriate term. I'm glad they won. There were some good signs of things. I think they were able to work on some things yesterday and test some things out, and it was a good opportunity to do that. And in all reality, I liked what I saw from the defense a lot yesterday. So, that was pretty. It was okay. It was okay yesterday. It wasn't, I think setting the tone with our expectations for the season. Wins like yesterday in the past, might have been a little more disappointing, wanting more out of it. However, right now, I'm just kind of happy that they won.
I'm content.
Right. And it's building. I know it's not necessarily the guys who are playing that meet this, but I think it's 54. Over half of the guys on the roster are freshmen or sophomores. So,
well, yeah, actually, I was sitting in our seats.
You're building, and to be 2-0 when you're building, whether you can actually come out and say that or not, because you can't. At Penn State, Franklin can't come out and be like, listen, I'm going to do the best we can, but I'm building for when my guys are here.
Right.
He can't say that. In the pros, you can say that almost. You can't maybe not use those words, but you can at least imply that. Mm-hmm. In college, you can't. You can't say that but he doesn't have to. The fans know. Let me rephrase that. Some people are aware. Some people are amazingly unaware with lots of things.
Yeah, well, that goes without saying.
However, it's fun to kind of it's fun to see a team still hit successes on the field as they're getting better.
Right. Now, what I was going to say was I was sitting next to my dad at the football game yesterday, and in front of my aunt and Uncle Dennis, who I had on here in the show about a month or so ago, 6 weeks ago, talked about Penn State football. He had predicted 10-2 that at the end of the season. I think you went 7-5, I went 8-4, and he said that after the first two games, you're 2-0, but same thing, we're content with that, but there's still some alarming things that are going on, and I know a lot of people mention this, that your biggest improvement is supposed to be between week 1 and week 2, and if that's any indication, that wasn't a great sign, because yesterday the Penn State game was okay. They won, but if they were playing a better opponent, it would have been closer, or they would have lost.
On the other hand, I try and look at it from I'm trying to look at it at a different perspective of, if you look historically, Penn State and UCF aren't the first teams to play in Ireland. Historically, teams returning from that trip, there's some kind of
extended jet lag.
Yes, and they're just not as enthusiastic, all right? Or
that's a perfect way to describe them.
And so you have that. You also have Akron, who can put up some points. I'm not saying they're going to win the MAC this year or anything, but they're not going to be basement dwellers in the MAC, I don't believe. So a decent team. You had a noon start. That can be a little rough. The temperature was hot. These are excuses, and they shouldn't, none of them are very good excuses, but I think they all kind of contribute a little bit. However, I think this week coming up is a big one.
No, at Rutgers.
It's a winnable game.
Big Ten powerhouse Rutgers.
You can't go on the common opponents and things like that. Yeah. However, Akron destroyed Howard and shut him out, I believe.
Yeah, well, it was 41-0 or 47-6 or something.
Maybe Howard improved a lot from week 1 to week 2. But they were giving Rutgers a run for their money for a half.
38-27 or something like that?
Right. So, again, I'm not saying you have some things there, but
essentially what we're saying is it doesn't look like Rutgers is that good.
I'm expecting a win this week.
I'm expecting a win this week, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it tougher than maybe some are expecting.
If they play like they did this week,
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know how they would do. Because I don't know how good Rutgers is.
That Rutgers is better than we're
Rutgers
thinking.
Are?
But Rutgers State University of New Jersey, they want this game, because they think that Penn State, belittles them and talks down, which we do, because why should we give you respect? What respect have you earned from us in any capacity?
They did beat Louisville that one time 6 or 7 years ago.
Whoop-de-freaking do. The vitriol, though, coming from them and Maryland fans as they enter the Big Ten, not so much related to joining the Big Ten or conference powers and college football, but just their attitude towards everything that happened to Penn State a few years ago. They just keep focusing on that, and I have absolutely no love lost for anyone from Rutgers or Maryland. I hope Penn State destroys them.
Funny is not the right word, but it's kind of funny because in reality, most of the rest of the Big Ten, you hear stuff. You're always going to hear stuff. They hear stuff about their own, skeletons in the closet, all that kind of stuff. However, it's not as big of a thing in the Big Ten anymore with I say the original, meaning the people who had come to the Big Ten before Penn State and even Nebraska, and some of those other newcomers, but I think the big improvement is going to be from week 2 to week 3 for Penn State. I think they're going to play.
I hope so. I hope you're
better.
right. I hope you're right.
It's a night game at Rutgers. I don't think that's going to phase Penn State a whole lot. They do need to get the running game going. I thought Akeel Lynch looked good yesterday.
Yeah.
And people have been calling for him for a year and a half
2 years.
Yeah. Get him on the field. And I think I mentioned this to you, or I might have mentioned it to your Uncle Dennis up at Penn State. Personally, I felt like they stuck with the Wildcat a little long yesterday.
But it was working.
It was working. you're testing all kinds of. They ran it with 3 different guys back there. You test all kinds of things out. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And when you're talking about a guy like Akil Lynch, if you feel like you can't get him on the field in other spots, he showed he can make things happen. You got to get him on the field. You got to get the ball in his hands, and they found a way through that Wildcat formation at least to get something going and to give Rutgers something to think about for this week. Maybe if they spend an hour game planning for that, not that it would take an hour, but let's say they install a few defenses for that and we don't even use it. All right, well that's good. Whatever the reasoning was, I think there can be some positive things there.
Before we move on to Wilson, I want to point out that you mentioned about the young team. People are excited that they're hoping sometime in the next few weeks that when the Mitchell report comes, the Penn State football Mitchell report, not the baseball steroid Mitchell report, the second major Penn State football Mitchell report has I think been submitted and is due out publicly soon.
Yeah, a lot of people think it'll come out this week.
All signs point to it being glowing review once again of Penn State. There's anticipation for sanctions being reduced, and the biggest thing is. Like you kind of said it, we're not so much playing for this year as much as the seniors, graduating people don't want to hear that, but you're almost playing for next year. Why are we playing for next year? Because one, it looks like, based on rumors, that the bowl ban will be gone. You look like you are receiving more or all of your scholarships back. You have this incredible recruiting class that just came in and another one right behind it. They're already working on the one after that. And like you said, they're a young team. I went over the starting roster for offense and defense yesterday that was listed in the program. There is one person you're losing on offense. That means you have 10 returning starters. And the person you're losing on offense is Belton Zwinak, the running back group. But guess who's behind him? Akil Lynch, who looked great yesterday. Oh, yeah, and then Jonathan Thomas, Nick Scott, and there's one more, Mark Allen.
Yeah.
That doesn't include anyone coming in as a freshman next year. So running back is the one spot you could afford to lose. You're losing 2 guys that have been solid the last 3 years, including the start of this year. But you have so much talent behind them that it's not going to be a big deal. Hackenberg will be into his 3rd year as a starter. The whole offensive line will be back as long as none of them decide to turn pro.
Now,
all your speed playmaking wide receivers are true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, or sophomores. They're all back. So whatever you see this year, you're going to get the same but better next year. Defensively, 7 out of the 11 should be back as long as no one jumps to the NFL early. You lose 4 guys.
Yeah.
So you have 17 starters back.
If you look at the group that is possibly the strongest in the recruiting classes, it's DBs.
Right.
They're, man, but you got to keep winning. You got to keep winning to help keep that intact. You can't fall off. I think 7's enough to keep the core of the recruiting class intact. I'd heard that Brandon. No, is it Brandon Wimbush?
Yeah, the quarterback.
I had heard he got an offer from wherever it was that he had kind of been holding out for. That was all. That was all there was to the news. It wasn't like anything else had changed. But there's some other guys there too. It's not like he's the only guy that Penn State's counting on. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out on so many different fronts. We could do multiple shows on this.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, they're 2-0, moving into the Big Ten schedule next week, and they've got they start with Rutgers at Rutgers on Saturday night. So that would be a big win.
Yeah.
With a winnable game against UMass the next week, and so far 0-2 Northwestern coming in at the end of the month. They could be. Well, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, although I'm sure that
win this week
Piscataway next Saturday will be pumping the whole 45,000 people that they can cram into whatever the heck they call their. I'm just going to stop here now before I start going off on a tangent about how much I hate Rutgers. All right, Penn State 2-0, also 2-0, local team, high school football, Wilson 2-0. Entering this year, 10 games, you got 7 league games, 3 non-league games, you play them all at the beginning of the year the way it's set up. You looked at it based on what Wilson lost, basically everyone on offense. I think most of the defense, save for 2, 3, maybe pushing to 4 guys coming back on defense, depending on how you look at the rotation. So 4 starters back out of 22. Now, that burned a lot of media writers last year because of Wilson losing so much from that dominant 2012 team that won the district championship and lost to North Allegheny in the Final Four of the state title tournament. But then they went on to go 10-0, win the first 2 games in the league. Were in a real tight game with Lower Dauphin. They lost by a field goal in the last second. That kicker is now at Penn State. Saw him there kicking yesterday. Lower Dauphin won the district title anyway. So
and went on to lose the state title, didn't they?
No, they didn't. They didn't win the next week.
Okay. All right.
They lost in the same position that Wilson lost the year
That's
before.
Right. You're right.
To Pittsburgh Central Catholic. They housed
You're
Lower Dauphin.
You're right. I was thinking.
But some of those Western PA schools are just absolutely ridiculous. Anyways, entering the year, people were like, well, we're not going to count out Wilson because they just continue the old cliche, they don't rebuild, they reload. And that's what the media was saying. But I think people in the community were a little bit iffy based on what was coming back. And looking at the non-league slate. I'm not saying that people were expecting 5-5, but I think looking at that non-league slate.
If they had 3 cupcakes at the beginning of the year, people were like, all right, same old. But, like, people who knew the schedule were like, Mifflin's really talented.
If you knew much about high school football, you were looking at the non-league slate going, wow, this will be interesting. Mifflin
returned a ton from last year's district playoff team, that got upset by the second team Wilson was playing, who returned a number 18, of key players,
17
including
or 18
a kid who's like a junior who started getting D1 offers last year.
Yeah. Just looking at it, you were like, wow. And they could reasonably go 0-3 in the non-league. Then they could run the gauntlet in the LL Section 1 and finish 7-3. But you want to win 8, 9, 10 games. That's kind of the way the Wilson standard has been raised, especially since Coach Doms took over, 9 years ago now. But you can't overlook a rivalry even if they're not supposed to be good. But Mifflin was supposed to be good, and he looked to be very good.
Yeah.
Then you have CD East, first 2 at home, thankfully. But CD East, like you mentioned, 17, 18 starters back. Upset Mifflin in the playoffs last year. Have a ton of athletic talent.
I saw, I'll be honest, I wouldn't want to play them again in November. I know we traditionally do very well.
When you play a
Wilson
team
does very well the second time they play them. But just... it seemed like they were just not clicking, so, like their passing game was struggling a little. We were getting pressure on, but like the athletes, oh my gosh, there are athletes everywhere.
Then the third game upcoming this Friday is Central Dauphin, which is a premier Mid-Penn Conference team. They have a history with Wilson, one of which I despise. 3 years ago, they beat Wilson in the district championship game. I was there on the sidelines watching that. It was a very contested game and very fair. I mean, they didn't do anything wrong. It was just, you don't like losing to them. They actually went on to win the state title.
That's what I was thinking of, not the Lower Dauphin. That's what I was thinking of.
Okay,
Wilson lost by a field goal, and they went on to win by a field goal the state championship. Right?
In the last few years, Wilson's lost to the team that has won the district title, gone to the Final Four, or won the state title. Right. They lost to Central Dauphin 2011. They won the state title. Lost to North Allegheny 2012. They won the state title. Lost to Lower Dauphin last year. They won the district title and got to the Final Four in the state tournament. But Central Dauphin also ended my senior year in the district title game. So I don't like Central Dauphin just because of the history that I've had with the Wilson teams and them. So going to their place next week and playing them, I'm very much looking forward to this, and I hope that the guys are ready to go because I want this one. Especially to look and say, oh, you're 3-0 in the league after people thought you could be 0-3. So if you didn't know, Wilson beat Mifflin in thrilling fashion in week 1, 35-34 in overtime. They were actually losing 28-13 with, I think, about 8 minutes to play in the fourth quarter. And they were able to pull some magic out of the hat and tie the game with 15 seconds left. Well, they had to get the 2-point conversion, which they did. Went into overtime. Mifflin scored on the second play but missed the kick. Wilson scores on their first play. Make the kick. Game over. Incredible Gursky Lynn Trophy has never been in Mifflin's hand because it debuted in 2012, and we've won all 4 games since. We played twice in 2012, once in the beginning of the year and then once in the playoffs, beginning of last year and then this year. And I said the seniors on this team have never lost to Mifflin. There's a chance they could meet again in November, and I don't know if it's ever happened that if they would meet and Wilson would win again, that any group of seniors can say we were 5-0 against Mifflin.
Yeah, I don't know if that, just by, most of the teams where it would have been possible in terms of ninth graders even playing, it was so long ago there weren't really playoffs. I don't really know. Long way to go.
Yeah.
Before we
don't want to get
there,
ahead of ourselves.
But in terms of both teams, especially Mifflin, they look like they have the talent to go on a long run here.
Yeah,
and
absolutely could meet them again.
They took it to Lancaster Catholic this week, rebounding nicely. Some people just didn't know how they would, kind of rebound from that emotional loss in week 1. They put that to rest pretty quickly.
Yeah, they house Lancaster Catholic.
Looking at their schedule, I don't know who they have this week, but looking at their schedule, it looks like from other scores, some of their bigger games left are maybe week 9 and week 10. So I don't know exactly the details there, but we'll have to kind of wait and see how that works out.
Yeah, and this week, Friday night, Wilson hosted CD East, a team that returned all those starters, upset Mifflin in the district playoffs last year, housed Milton Hershey in week 1, 36-7, I believe, and came in here with a ton of playmakers, quarterback, running back, receiver, big guys, too. Their guys were large, tall, strong, fast, everything, throw it out there, you name it. Coming in, I was a little concerned entering the game, didn't know how we could match up. Well, Wilson walked away with a 31-14 victory, and we're in control for most of the game. It started to get away from them a little bit in the fourth quarter, where CDE scored 2 touchdowns in 2 minutes to cut it to 24-14. Wilson was actually forced to punt with about 6 minutes to play, and then a little miscue from CD East left a Wilson hot man on the punt team open.
Right.
The coaches saw it. The punter, who happens to be the backup quarterback, saw it.
I had a great view of that. I'm looking, I'm like, the play clock's running down. I'm like, what is he doing looking at the sideline? Because I couldn't really see because the guy was so far over. I couldn't really see, and I'm like, what's going on? And then I see him, and he kind of nods his head. They snap the ball and pass it over, and it was wide open. And it wasn't like it was 4th and 5. It was 4th and long.
It was 4th and 18 or something.
Right. So a great job. I think it was John Fox that caught that.
No, it was Joey Lopez.
That's right, Joey Lopez. I knew it was someone that I knew who it was. Caught it and just got upfield. Didn't try and cut back and make. He ended up didn't make a lot of it. He got down inside
3-yard
the
line.
5, but didn't try and cut back. It just he
ran down
needed 18 yards, and he just ran straight ahead and got the first down.
Then Timmy Whitmore put it in next play, extended the lead 31-14. That's how it ended. But for the most part, Wilson held their big playmakers in check.
Yeah.
And they were actually doing it. You don't like to point out injuries, especially when you win, though. What does it matter? Wilson was still missing 2 or 3 offensive linemen, one who's out the whole year. They lost their starting safety during the game. Running back, cornerback Shane Dancer was hobbled looked like cramps for most of the game.
It was really hot and humid.
And they also were down a starting cornerback for the first 2 games, and Zach Button hurt his knee during the final scrimmage. So a lot of guys you were counting on to shut down some of these guys weren't even there, and they still held them. So it's a good sign, although at times it looked like, even with the 31-14 win, it almost looked like Wilson was going through the motions.
Yeah, I mean, it looked... What did they jump up, 17-0?
Yeah. That's what it was at half.
Right. I think, not that it's acceptable. I think some of the urgency kind of dissipates at that. And it's tough.
But when you have a team with that kind of playmakers, you can't let them back.
Right, and coaches talk about this, and this is not unique to football. It's all the time, all sports. You jump out to lead, and then sometimes complacency sets in. And not even like you're going to sleep on the team, just that edge, that extra edge that you need to be at your best. If that's not there, you never know what's going to happen. So,
all right.
Speaking of complacency,
So Wilson plays at Central Dauphin this week to finish the non-league slate. Hopefully that they're 3-0 when we come back on the air next Sunday. Lastly, you mentioned Mifflin. They actually play Manheim Township, who is a Lancaster Lebanon League Section 1 team that Wilson will play this year. Township went toe-to-toe with Central Dauphin. Probably should have beat Central Dauphin in week 1.
Blocked.
So Mifflin will host Manheim Township, so we'll see where both those teams are next week. All right, we're going to quickly move on to our NFL stuff, but before we do, we'll throw out the contact information, even though we're running a little behind. We got a lot to talk about.
We'll move through these games pretty quickly.
Yeah,
today.
Justin has the contact stuff for you.
Yeah, so as Joey mentioned, we'd love to have your take on any of the Penn State, or football stuff we've talked about so far, or any of the predictions we're going to throw out there, or the NFL games today. We'd love to have your take on any of those, what you've seen. There are definitely some surprises today. So we're going to touch on those in a few minutes, but we'd love to hear from you. You can call the show using the Mays Sandwich Shop hotline at 530-563-6297. Again, 530-563-6297. You can also email us using the Mays Sandwich Shop inbox at joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. Again, joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. And we're also all over social media, and Joey will tell you about that.
Yeah, we're on Facebook. We have a fan page on there. Like us in that location, on Twitter as well, at Joe Mays and J-Raff. Okay, so we're going to quick run through our AFC and NFC East picks. Then we're going to recap a few of the Week 1 games before we get out of here in about 20 minutes. All right, we'll start with the AFC East, my domain here. I think we both were in complete agreement. I don't think we strayed at all. The win totals were pretty close on. No significant deviations from either of us. And yeah, we were exactly the same. So we went Patriots, Dolphins, Jets, Bills, top to bottom. I said about 11 wins for New England. You said 11 or 12. I said 10 wins for the Dolphins. You said 10 or 9 or 10. I said 7 for the Jets. You said 8. And for the Bills, I had them way down at 4. You had them 5 or 6. So we're pretty close on everything. We agree that that's the pecking order that we see happening. Even the win total is pretty close. Although after today's action, maybe you would change some of these, maybe not.
Right. But some of them I look at and I'm like, oh, a good start to meeting those expectations of mine.
I still think that maybe I underestimated Buffalo, but I still think I pegged the rest of them right there because even though the Jets won, they played Oakland, who had to travel to them.
And a rookie quarterback.
Right. So that's not a big deal. It actually was a close game.
Early on, the Jets looked actually pretty decent. I was thinking of pushing the Jets up above 500. I don't know why. I honestly don't know why. I just think that despite playing for the Jets, I feel like Geno Smith it could be okay. Like I don't know that that's going to happen.
I don't know that they have enough around him for that.
Right,
I mean, Chris Johnson looked good. Chris Ivory looked, but it's against the Raiders.
Right.
Like I don't think the Raiders are any good.
Right.
So.
No, I understand. And yeah, so I think I still think they'll get close to 500. I think the Jets.
Well, yeah, I think 6 to 9 is their bottom and top.
Yeah, despite today's outcomes, I would stick with it. However, in the AFC East, I'd say, right, it could be a little tighter race than I had anticipated in terms of at least those interdivision games. Those divisional games could be really entertaining this year, something that they haven't always been over the last couple of years.
I wouldn't change my predictions after today. I might up Buffalo a little bit, but I still, even despite the outcome, I wouldn't flip-flop Miami and New England because even though they proved it that they're better in one game, they got to prove it to me that they're better over the course of the season.
Absolutely. And I think they said like Tom Brady's like
6-7 in Miami as a starter.
So take it for what it's worth. I was actually thinking, it's unfortunate that the Dolphins get the Patriots at home now because that means I don't know when they play them again, but
I know when they play them again because I'll be there.
Oh, nice!
I'm going there in I think it's week 14. It's December 13th or 14th.
That's what I was getting at. Like if it was flip flopped, then.
No, I'm going.
However, I see you don't. You're glad it worked out this way because otherwise that probably wouldn't have worked out.
So yeah, exactly. Well, my uncle, who's been on the show a couple of times, Rich from Massachusetts, he has kind of had almost a standing offer that wanted me to come to a Dolphins-Patriots game since they're a huge Patriots fan and I've been a Dolphins fan. I've never gone, never taken him up on it, but when they released the schedule this year in April and I saw that they were playing a couple of days before my 30th birthday, I said to him, I was like, I think I'm going to come up this year. So I'm going
Nice.
up for the Dolphins-Patriots game, and I think it's like week 14 or 15 in mid-December. I hope
could be a meaningful game.
It's a meaningful game. That'd be incredible. But I'm still going to stick with the Patriots.
I'm sure you'd
on
settle
top.
for the meaningful for the Dolphins, and the Patriots are way out of it by now.
That'd be great too.
For that.
But as long as Miami is still challenging for a playoff spot, and maybe even having been meaningful for the division title, that would be even better. So we'll see what happens. But I think Patriots, Dolphins, Jets, Bills is where I'd stick, and I think
absolutely
we're in agreement on that.
Yep.
All right, we'll talk about those teams again in a little bit, but we got to quickly run through the NFC East, which I think we are also, again, pretty close to one another. Excuse me. We just flip-flop the middle teams, but again, we kind of are like, they could be close. We both agree that the local team, the Eagles, are the team to beat in that division. We actually both said 11 wins, 10-11 wins. I don't know that I see them getting to 12. But I think 10-11 is the right range for them.
Yeah, I think they would have to get some lucky breaks to get to 12. I don't necessarily see that happening. It's hard to project how things will settle out. They got nicked up on the offensive line today. How serious is that going to be? On the other hand, they played better on the offensive line after they were nicked up. They were missing some key guys. I don't mean to,
well, without Lane Johnson from a suspension, Evan Mathis went out injured.
Right. Yeah. So, where that'll end up, I was thinking 10 wins. If they don't win 10, I'd be disappointed.
Oh, absolutely. If they don't get double digits,
that being said, if they had 9, but because of tiebreakers and the division being down, win the division, okay, I'm okay with that. If you win the division, I don't really care how many wins you have. But I think 10 or 11 wins is where they should be. So
I agree.
That's where I'm going to put them.
And we also agree in last place, which we, unfortunately for my dad and for actually, I know a ton of Cowboys fans around here. I don't see Dallas being any good at all. And I mean, while San Francisco is supposedly one of the better teams in the league, they're housing the Cowboys at the moment. I actually went with. I would actually say 4 to 5 wins for Dallas. Now, you were a little bit more optimistic. You said 6 or 7.
Part of that's because I want to be wrong in the sense that I want to give them more credit now. I want to give them more credit now. So I'm going to stick with – I'm going to give them 7 wins. I'm going to give them 7 wins.
Definitely, that's very optimistic.
Last place. In reality, we talked about this a little bit, and we'll touch on it with our score, but – the defense looks okay.
Better than we thought.
Kind of. However, if their offense struggles like it has at times today, throughout the season, they could be in trouble. A lot of trouble. So, we're going to have to wait and see how this plays out. But they could be struggling to get the 4 or 5 wins.
I know. That's why I said I think 4 or 5 is where they're at right now.
I'm not even going to say it. We'll move on.
Now, we flip-flop Redskins, Giants. I have Redskins second, Giants third. You have Giants second, Redskins third. But based on the predictions, we're kind of in agreement that they're in the middle of the pack, anywhere between 7 and 9 wins.
Depending on how the rest of the league does, possibly contending for a second wild card, that second spot, but possibly out of the playoffs with a winning record. I had the Giants at around 9 wins and in second. I figure Tom Coughlin, they'll be calling for his head and they'll make a run.
They usually respond, but maybe that'll run out this year.
Yeah, it's got to run out at some point. We've talked about that with a few other teams. Maybe it runs out. I just think the Giants. Whether or not Eli is an elite quarterback, I just threw that out there because I knew you would hate that conversation.
We're already behind. Let's not go there.
Whether or not, I just think he's too good to have to string together a bunch of losing seasons here. I think they'll turn things around and be okay. And I really don't think the Redskins or Cowboys are actually that good. So I think that could be maybe 2 or 3 wins right there. So they generally play the Eagles tough. So maybe another one there. I don't know. I just think the Giants are going to get to 9 wins somehow. I don't really know how, but I think they're somehow going to get to 9 wins.
Which is funny because I don't really know how I have the Redskins getting to 8 wins, especially after today. But there was just something about it. I thought when the coach gets changed, systems change. And I also was buying into the bounce back effect from Robert Griffin, who had an incredible rookie year, looked terrible last year. If he stays healthy, I think he can be kind of like Cam Newton did last year for the Panthers. I didn't think they would jump up, and get to 12 wins, win the division and all that stuff. But I for some reason, something was telling me the Redskins will bounce back. Now, they looked bad today against the Texans, which we'll get to in a minute. But I'll stick with my guns. Eagles, Redskins, Giants, Cowboys.
And I'm going to stick to mine. Eagles, Giants, Redskins, Cowboys.
All right, so that's it for the predictions on that end. I don't think we need to get into wild cards and all the matchups. Let's just go right to the point. Who's your Super Bowl matchup?
You know what? And I'm going to go with it because I think it's... I think when the course of the long season plays out, I still think the Saints are going to be there contending because I think their offense will get clicking and they're going to have enough to get going. So I'm going to go Saints and Denver.
Who wins?
Denver. They burned me last year, but
I'm going with Saints and Broncos. Denver wins.
Oh my God.
We didn't plan this. When you said New Orleans, because I knew you were going to take Denver. So when you said New Orleans, I was like, oh my God, we're going to have the same pick. Yeah, I agree. I think now, New Orleans lost today, so it sounds funny to be talking about how they're the best team in the NFC, but, playing in Atlanta is never easy.
I'm not sure they're the best team now. I think come
by the
January,
end of the year, they're
going to be a team I don't want to face, like they were last year.
Manning will get his rematch with the Saints and Breeze. I think he comes out on top. You do too. So Saints, Broncos in Super Bowl 49 in Arizona in February, with the Broncos winning, Manning getting MVP, and riding off into the sunset. That's what I think is going to happen.
That would be it. And I'll be honest, anything short of my team winning, that's kind of what I would like to happen. We made no secret of that last year.
Right. So I think if I had to go back and look at the conference championship games, I would probably say, to me, Denver, New England is where I would lean. And I would probably say New Orleans versus... Boy. Right now I'll say Seattle, but that's kind of based on what I've seen already. A couple weeks ago I might have been different. I'll say New Orleans, Seattle, and Denver, New England. Those would be 2 awesome conference championships games, though.
Yeah, I would say I'm going to go Eagles and Saints, just to throw it out there.
If we had more time, I would jump into why I say I wouldn't take the Eagles, but that would take the rest of the time, and I want to go recap week 1.
I'll say Eagles, Saints, and I will say Denver and New England.
I wanted to go Cincinnati there, but I just can't pull the trigger. All right, so we know that the first game of the year was the Thursday night game where Green Bay went to Seattle to reenact the Hail Mary game. It went all Seattle's way as they beat the Packers 36-16. Packers,
and it wasn't that close.
No, Packers look bad, and we kind of touched on that a little bit. Maybe the NFC North will be completely different than we thought, but Seattle looked like a team to beat. Now, I was down on them a little bit. Still thought they'd be good. They look pretty good, so let's see how that works out in week 2. Starting at the bottom, teams that we just talked about, the Saints lost today to the Falcons in overtime, 37-34.
Yeah, but at the end of the year, I'm still going to put my money on Drew Brees and the Saints over Matty Ice and the Falcons.
Even though he had almost 500 yards passing today, I still take Brees over him. In the AFC North, Bengals-Ravens in Baltimore.
Ugly game.
Bengals hadn't beat the Ravens, I think, at home in like 5 years. So we had Saints-Falcons thrilling game 1, Bengals-Ravens thrilling game 2, as that came down to the final few minutes. Bengals win, improved to 1-0, 23-16 over Baltimore.
Awful today too, by the way. He had a long touchdown pass, but man, did he look bad.
Probably the first surprise and another thrilling game. That's 3 for 3. In overtime, Buffalo went to Chicago and won 23-20. We both picked Chicago to win the NFC North and be one of the better teams in the NFC. I thought the Bills could be quite possibly the worst team in the AFC down there with Oakland.
Their defense wasn't altogether terrible last year.
They're above average.
And they looked decent. Holding the Bears
now,
to 20 is pretty good.
This is the life's great question when it comes to sporting events. Are the Bills better than we thought, or the Bears worse than we thought?
And I think it's probably.
I would rather it be the Bills are better than we thought than the Bears are worse than we thought.
I was going to give you the cop-out answer of a little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
I think the Bills are better than we thought. I still think the Bears are going to win that division.
Now, if I had to go back in time and change one prediction that I made,
I was going to call you out on this.
This
one
was
the first
bad.
game.
I mean, I was a little down when Bradford went out because I was banking on a breakout year for him. That offense to do something.
And I believe if we rewind to that show, I told you that was the problem right there.
Right.
Now,
yeah.
I'm going to eat these words because I'm calling you out right now.
But I wanted to go out on the limb and do something, and I went with the Rams just because I thought their defense could match what Seattle and San Francisco have done the last few years. Not so good.
Not off to a good start.
The Vikings, who we picked as the worst team in the NFC North, beat the Rams, who I picked as the best team in the NFC West, beat them 34-6. I also didn't play Cordarrelle Patterson in my fantasy league. Oh, and by the way, the Rams' backup quarterback got hurt. They went to their third-string quarterback, Austin Davis. They produced 2 field goals through the whole game. The defense, which is supposed to be so good, gave up 34 points.
That's the scary point. If they would have lost, 9-6, 13-6 or something like that, okay. They gave up a ton of points.
To the Vikings.
That's the concern. In St. Louis.
That's
the scary part. That's scary because they needed they needed a great defense to begin with. And when Bradford went out, they needed to be at a great defense every week. And week 1, you can throw that out the window.
I said the Rams would go 11-5. They could go 1-15, and that would be like the worst prediction in NFL history.
Then they could fix that quarterback problem.
All right, so that's one crappy game. But we had another great game in Pittsburgh as the Browns and Steelers went at it in true AFC North fashion. Looked like the Steelers were going to run away with it. They were up 27-3. The Browns stormed all the way back to tie it at 27-all. And then
pulled the Browns
and
lost on a last
and the Steelers kick a field goal. They win it. I took Cleveland in this game because I really thought that Pittsburgh was going to be the worst team in the AFC North this year. I thought the Browns would be a little bit better than them. I don't think this proves anything yet. Maybe it proves that they're both pretty similarly athletically challenged at some spots. I don't think either team's going to be good enough for the playoffs, but it's week 1. It was a great game. Steelers beat the Browns 30-27 in a game that has massive comeback written all over it. I think people in this area were like, wow, what is going on? How can we start this way? The Jacksonville Jaguars jumped out to a 17-0 lead on the Eagles at halftime. Then the Eagles scored 34 unanswered points.
My concern was not that the Eagles wouldn't score 17 points. Or 18, I guess, in theory, to get more than 17. But what shocked me was not giving up another point.
Yeah. After the way they looked in the first half.
Right. So, I'm glad they bounced back. I'm glad they took care of business.
Now, our boy Chad Henne had a decent day. He looked incredible in the beginning.
Right.
He ended up throwing for 266 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He had a fumble, but he got clocked on a blindside hit.
An unblocked guy.
Yeah, how you do that. The Eagles actually scooped and scored with that to extend it to 34-17.
I'm sure it will increase the calls for
Bortles
to start, but Henne wasn't the reason they lost today.
No, the offense couldn't do anything in the second half. People might point to him as a point of accuracy and
I might point to the fact that you have Toby Gerhardt as your starter. I know people are high on him.
He's on my fantasy team.
I know people are high on him this
both
year.
of them.
I don't get it.
He's on both of my fantasy teams.
You also picked the Rams, but
okay. All right. All right, let's move on to a couple other games. All right, we're going to say nothing about this because who cares? The Jets beat the Raiders 19-14.
Jets, Jets.
In more important AFC East news, the Patriots, who we both picked number 1, came down to Miami and lost 33-20. The Dolphins are 1-0, 1-0 in the division.
Look at that second half line.
The Patriots didn't score in the second half.
23-0 in the second half.
The Dolphins scored 23 unanswered points. Miami was losing 20-10, and they took it to New England in the second half.
They dominated the second half.
It was one of, 3
both
or 4
sides
games
of the ball.
That was a tale of 2 halves.
And you mentioned it before the show. Noshawn Moreno opened my eyes today. Yeah. Whoa, I haven't seen him run like that since Georgia. I know, absolutely.
I thought his one. Well, he was in Denver for the first 4 or 5 years of his career, but the 1 year last year when he broke out, I attributed it to Peyton Manning.
You got to think Peyton Manning's thinking, where was that?
And everything was that he was overweight when he came to Miami. He was injured during the preseason. I didn't expect anything out of him. He got 124 yards and was the main catalyst in the Dolphins beating the Patriots today.
And just. watching him run was fun today. He was running hard.
Like he did at Georgia.
Right. Sometimes you have fast guys who are running away from everyone, and that can be exciting. But equally as exciting, and maybe more exciting, is guys who are running hard. He was running hard today. That was fun.
Now, I'll move on from that because I'm not hearing anything from New England. No calls or messages from anyone up in New England. So I'm just going to stick that in my backpack.
I think he's too busy giving away your ticket to the next game.
I'm hoping that it doesn't come back to bite me and, the Dolphins lose the next 15 or something. But I'm very happy that they're 1-0, especially 1-0 in the division. They have to beat Buffalo next week because starting the season, not just 2-0, but 2-0 in the division is huge.
Right.
Now, I'm going to pat myself on the back for this one because as much as I sucked with the Rams, we both agree we thought the Chiefs would be worse this year. But I was all over this Titans. I took Tennessee today in our pool because I thought the Titans were going to take it to the Chiefs because I think Tennessee is better than everyone thinks they are. Now, maybe again,
I'd like them to be better. I'd like them
to
to be better, but I'm figuring Jake Locker's only good for the month of September.
Well, we'll see what happens.
So
for 1 week,
I hope not. I hope they do well.
For 1 week, I'm happy about this. The Titans went to Kansas City, beat them 26-10. The Chiefs lost 2 defensive starters to torn Achilles, so this could be a regression to 2 years ago when they went 2-14. They lost a ton of guys on defense and on offense to injuries that were lost for the whole season. The Chiefs having to play both San Diego and Denver, I think the Chiefs are gonna be
in trouble.
In trouble, yes. Another crappy game that we don't have to say much about. Redskins went to Houston. Houston won 17-6.
Exactly what you would expect from Houston. Great defense, offense is bad. Redskins showed nothing.
Yeah. We talked Green Bay and Seattle already. The 2 Monday night games, Giants at Lions tomorrow night and Chargers at Cardinals tomorrow night. That's the later one. I don't have much to say about either of them.
Some teams can kind of get off to a good start, but I really don't know what to expect in either of those games.
Giants Lions will be high scoring. I think Chargers or Cardinals will be a normal ball game and not a lot of points, but not all defense. I'm more interested in Chargers Cardinals. Unfortunately, that's the late one.
I'm more interested in Lions Giants. So.
Well, good for you.
Go Lions.
Tonight,
I hope Matthew Stafford throws a lot.
Tonight, Colts Broncos Manning revenge game. It's in Denver
That's
though.
An exciting one.
So that'll be a good game. I'm gonna watch some of that. 2 late games. Panthers trying to hold on against the Buccaneers. Looks like they're going to win. They're up 20-14.
Just kicked a field goal to go up 20-14, I think.
So
Buccaneers should get the ball back
in the final 20
need
seconds they can get a touchdown. Carolina will beat the Buccaneers with a backup quarterback, Cam Newton, not playing today. In Dallas, where we said the Cowboys are going to be bad this year, 49ers probably not as good as they were in the last few years. Dallas trying to make it interesting. They're still losing 28-10, but with about 2 minutes to play, they are in the red zone. They need a lot to come back from this, but they were losing 28-3.
Yeah, it seems like they stopped the bleeding.
Yeah, but Tony Romo had 3 first-half interceptions. DeMarco Murray had a fumble. They had at least 4 turnovers at halftime. It's really bad. So there we are. That's week 1. That's our predictions. That's Penn State. That's Wilson.
That's football.
That's football. Good night, everybody. So we'll be back here next week talking Week 2 NFL action. And hopefully we can both report that our teams are 2-0, that Penn State and Wilson are 3-0, and life is good.
I like to say, since my son has been born, my football teams have won every game.
And, that's all you can ask about the birth of a child is that your sports teams are doing well. In the season that matters.
I know he's rooting for them.
Well, absolutely. He should be. I mean, he's a Wilson, Penn State, Phillies, Flyers, Sixers, Dolphins fan. We'll work on it. All right. You got any shout-outs, anything to say? I'm trying to think.
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, I want to make sure I don't miss anyone. That would be bad. Missing people is bad.
It's frowned upon.
Oh, right. Friday was my wife's birthday, so I probably should mention that. Yeah, so happy little bit belated birthday to my wife. Would have said something last week, but didn't end up having it last week. But yeah, happy birthday to Kelly. And looks like Adam's wife has a birthday this coming week. Right. So happy birthday a little bit early to Kim. And also this week, our friend
Pat.
and who's been on the show in the past, Pat O'Leary, will be celebrating a birthday. So happy birthday to him as well. And the last thing I want to say is get well soon to one of my favorite kids that I coached at Wilson as a senior on the football team this year, Dustin Miller. Broke his leg Friday night. He's a senior, and he's just one of those guys that you're always rooting for. He may be undersized, but the pride and passion that he has for Wilson football and football in general is hard to match. So hopefully he can bounce back and contribute later this season. So get well soon, bud.
Yeah, just the same thing. Good kid. So hopefully he can bounce back.
All right, I think that's everything. Thanks for joining us. That wraps up the 147th episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show.
We hope you tune in every Sunday evening at 6:30 for our take on sports. Until next time, I'm J-Raff.
And I'm Joe Mays. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. Don't forget, you can download each episode of the show from the podcast section of the iTunes Store. We'll see you next time, and thanks again for listening.